beside my professional interest and areas of expertise, I also had the interest in the history of the medicine, and that brought me to the history of the Czech Society of Nephrology, which was founded a little bit earlier, before the International Society of Nephrology. And then, when I discovered that in 1963 was held the second International Society of Nephrology Congress in Prague, that brought me to the interest to know something more about that. How did it happen? And I think it's a very interesting story, because in the early 60s, or maybe even in late 50s, nephrology still did not exist as a subject. It was a subject of the internal medicine, but it was not perceived as a one special branch or specialization of the internal medicine. And then happened that in 1960 was founded the International Society of Nephrology, and they decided to go to the East. And that's very interesting, because probably one of the reasons was that they wanted to support the idea that the ISN is really international society. So they also wanted to bring to the people from the east part of the Europe to that story. But furthermore, I think there were 2 points which were very important. One out of them was that in the 50s, the Czechoslovakia, nephrology was a subject who was really well developed, because, by the way, in 1955 was held the first dialysis treatment in Prague, Czechoslovakia. And actually it was the 4th place worldwide where the acute dialysis was successfully performed. And the second reason was the personality of Professor Brod, who was really eminent, worldwide important nephrologist, and who was one of the founder of the International Society of Nephrology. And probably that unique situation created that story that suddenly the council members decided to bring the Congress to Prague. Yeah, that's another interesting issue, because if you consider how congresses are organized today, and if you consider how big is the financial burden, and first you have to find out the money to organize the event, and then you can go forward. It was of interest that this Congress was supported by the Czechoslovak government. So probably as a reason like to keep the propaganda, because don't forget that they were in the time of deep socialism. So the government wanted to probably create the idea that everything is working appropriately. So a significant part of the finance were given by the Ministry of Health. And that was actually something like a state congress, which is something really amazing. Because even in that time, the industrial support was not so strong. There were some industry exhibitions, but the support was quite low. So from that point of view, it's really amazing that the Congress was possibly organized. And the second fact, what was very special, that don't forget that in that time existed the Iron Curtain. So as far as I know, it was the first large international congress which was held in the sort of Eastern Bloc. So probably that was a really unique situation. And the last point, which is again important to add, that also the personality of Jan Brod was important, because he influenced also the run of the Congress, because he had good relation to different kind of people in Czechoslovakia, also to the politicians who allowed him to organize this Congress. So always it was something balancing, how to manage it and how to be allowed to do it. Point of view, I think it's also an interesting issue, because the number of participants exactly was 899, which was quite a high number if you consider even today numbers of the participants. And they were altogether from 41 countries, so it was really the International Congress. And another issue that is of interest was that about 1/5 of the participants were from the US. So for many out of them, it was really first opportunity to go to the east part of Europe. Furthermore, what was also important that there was a highest percentage participants from Czechoslovakia, because they were about 155 people from Czechia. And the other countries, including Germany, France, and the others from Europe. Another issue was concerning the topic of the Congress and the number of abstracts. Altogether, there were submitted 217 abstracts were accepted, but altogether more than 500 abstracts were sent for the evaluation. So it means that the acceptance rate was about 40%. So that's of interest. I know from the personal memories of Professor Rychlik, who was the secretary of this Congress, that in Czechia in that time we submitted about 27 abstracts and 15 out of them were accepted, which is quite a high number if you consider again the level of nephrology in that time in the whole Europe. So I think it was really interesting issue also from that point of view. Then what one can add is that what was on the program from today's point of view. There were 5 most important topics. One out of them was renal physiology, and that's important also from today's view. Then the second was chronic dialysis and transplantation, because in that time the first transplant and as well first chronic dialysis patients were managed. Then the important issue was the diseases, renal diseases in pregnancy. This is really interesting that in that time they took care about that. It's a small part or small issue for the user. And then there were the others, chronic pyelonephritis, which was important disease in that period of century. And the last one was renal hypertension. And renal hypertension was in that time part of the nephrologist work, so they took care about both of these kind of patients. So there's no surprise that renal hypertension was an important subject of this time. And by the way, it is of interest that if I'm not mistaken, it was for the first time when was the so-called pre-Congress symposiums, which was held in Prague. The topic was the aldosterone, which is a hormone which was at that time really flourished. And there were the experts who met in the symposium, and it was just before the Congress. So it was again a very interesting issue. There is a lot of details which we described in the memories of Professor Rychlik, because we issued that in the book of the History of Czech Nephrology. But among those, I would like to pick up 2 things. One out is a picture of the hammer. It was made from the wood. The hammer was used to start the sessions like in the court, bing, and the session started. And then the second is the recording of 2 songs. Actually, the first one was the official fanfare for the Congress. So the Congress started and ended with this fanfare, which was composed to the occasion of this Congress. And the other issue was that leading nephrologists in that time interested to be also a musician, and they composed a song which was called the March of Nephrologists. And for example, Professor John Merrill, who was a very leading nephrologist in that time, played a saxophone in this, and also song, so that's really a good artifact. There were also other issues. For example, the language issue. In that time, the Iceland was bilingual society, so the official languages were English and French. And from the memories, I have noted that there was also a little bit problems, the language problems, how to make the understanding, and everything had to be delivered in 2 languages. So it was in that time like a fight both languages. And furthermore, because it was in the country which belonged to the Eastern Bloc, the Russian was one of the original languages, but they were almost no one from that part. Because it was state regulation.
Are both and one in counter current flow.